Hello and welcome. My name is Barbara Grosh. I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Rochester Metropolitan Area, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar tonight. We are here to talk about redistricting in New York State. Let's look at the proposed maps. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. We do not endorse candidates or parties, nor do we work against candidates or parties. We do, however, work on advocating certain political issues, primarily clean government sort of issues like fairness and transparency. So redistricting is right down our alley. And so I am going to introduce my co-speaker tonight. Dylan, if you want to open your camera, I'd like to introduce Dylan Daler. Dylan is a graduate student in applied sociology at the University of Alabama in Birmingham. He's a big supporter of nonpartisan redistricting, Notre Dame football, and Chicago Cubs baseball. In other words, he's used to supporting tough cases. Dylan is also a data wonk, and he's better than most of us at using all this redistricting software. He's on a first name basis with the tech staff at the state IRC. So we're lucky to have him here tonight. So maybe we should start with an introductory explanation about where we are in the redistricting process. So in 2014, New York State passed a new constitutional amendment that created an Independent Redistricting Commission. So this is the first time around the block for the Redistricting Commission. So Dylan, do you want to tell us how it was appointed?
Yeah, so the Redistricting Commission is made up of two, I don't want to call them sides, but two commissioners, a chair and a vice chair. David Amamora, I believe, and Jack Martins. And each, the minority caucus and the majority caucus in the New York State Senate and the New York State Legislature appointed individual members to both sides of the caucus or of the Independent Redistricting Commission.
So the Senate majority leader and the Senate minority leader each appointed two people, and the Assembly minority leader and Assembly majority leader each appointed two people.
Yep, and then the final two members were selected by the other 8. So it's composed of 10 members. Neither of the final 2 appointees are enrolled Democrats or Republicans within the last 5 years. And they also, I will say that the appointing authorities were supposed to, and most likely did, consult with various voting rights organizations across the state to make sure that they had a more diverse set of opinions on their commission.
Right. Okay, so the commission's been working since June or July, and they finally got telephones and fax machines then. And they had one round of hearings. They went around the state. They held hearings in the summer and asked people what they wanted in their districts. And hundreds of people came out from around the state and gave them ideas about what they wanted. You were there, I was there. There were, I think, maybe 10 or so people from the Rochester area who spoke. No, then they went back and the data was released by the census. Was it September 15th or something like that, or a little before that, I guess.
A little before that.
So it was on September 15th when they came out with their maps. Now, we were all hoping and expecting one set of maps, proposed maps, but that didn't happen. Okay, so let's talk about the rules they operate under in order to recommend maps, they need 7 out of the 10 members to vote for one set of maps. And in the time that they had, which was short, it was like a month, they didn't manage to come to a compromise. So in the end, they released 2 sets of maps, which I suppose are a Republican set and a Democratic set, although they didn't explicitly label them. They called them names and letters. So those are the maps that we're going to be looking at now. So then they held another set of hearings. They went all around the state. They came to Rochester. There were a lot fewer people testifying this time around. I haven't looked online to see if more people have submitted comments online, but now is the time to give input. They are taking input from now until about Thanksgiving, and then after Thanksgiving, I think they're more or less going to go in retreat and sit and argue with each other and move lines around on the maps. So now is really the time to give feedback, and that's why we're doing this now. So I was thinking we would just jump in and look at some maps. We've got 3 pairs of maps to look at, because we start with the congressional districts, and then we'll do the Senate districts, and then we'll do the assembly districts. And as I said, they released 2 of each. There's issues with them, so you and I have each made some of our own maps, which we might share too. I'm planning to. I think you have a nice one that I'd like to see. So let me find the right screen share. That's not it. Okay. Harder than it should be to get the right screen share sometimes. Wait, am I screen sharing now? Let me stop that.
You were screen sharing.
I don't know if what I was screen sharing. That's the problem. Here we go. Now I think I've got it right. Okay. So here we go. I hope everyone has good connections tonight, because these maps are a lot of pixels. So we're starting by looking at the congressional maps. And this is the set that's labeled the names maps. So I've started with a drawn back view so that you can see the whole state. So is names, is that the Democrats or the Republicans? I can't even remember.
Names is Republicans, letters is Democrats, or at least
Okay.
that's how it was suggested.
Okay, so this might be the Republican map then. So I've got a pin there in Rochester, so you can see that the Monroe County map looks fundamentally similar to what we've been for the last 10 years. And I'll zoom in a moment to show more, but there's interesting things to see from this distance. I find it very interesting. The whole entire southern tier is one district on this proposed map. So going from the Pennsylvania border on the west, clear across, including Binghamton, that's all one district. And you see Buffalo gets its own district, and then there's kind of a large wraparound that wraps around both Buffalo and Rochester to make a rural western district. So that's one proposal, and now I'm going to keep zooming in so we can get a better sense of the lines for Monroe County. So, you know, we lost a district this year, so each district has to be a little bit bigger than it used to be. So ours goes a little bit beyond Monroe County now. So in this proposed map, we've got Victor included. And I think maybe that whole southern border is out of Monroe County and into Ontario and what is that, Wyoming County down there. So that's a little bit of a change. Do you have any comments on that before I switch to the letters district?
Yeah, it does fully unite Monroe County, which is not currently Chris Jacobs to our west does represent a little slice of the county. So this is the first map in the last two, at least, have not had a unified Monroe County.
And that's basically because they get to draw it bigger and it was a little too big. So, I mean, there's a lot to like on these maps. You can see that it doesn't have the crazy kind of gerrymandering that we had in the period between 2000 and 2011, when we had the famous headphones district for Louis Slaughter. So now I'm switching to the other proposal. This is the letters map. So it makes the cuts slightly different. So we lose Victor, but we gain a little bit more further south. So what is that? Avon and Caledonia.
Almost to Geneseo.
Almost to Geneseo, right. So for most of us in Monroe County, it's not a huge difference between these two maps, but I would zoom out and say that there's other differences that'll make other people care a lot. Notice it does something quite different with the rest of Western New York. So instead of going across the whole of the southern tier, they go north to south for those rural districts. So we've got one to the west of us that, so it's beside Monroe County, and then it wraps around Buffalo. And then we've got a different one to the east of us and also to the south. So I'm sure that people in those areas probably have more strong opinions than I do. I think, where is Pittsford on this map?
Pittsford?
Yeah, did it make it into Monroe County?
Yeah. Yeah, the entire county is also in this one as well. It would be just north. Right south of East Rochester.
Okay, yeah. Right.
I think when I looked at the maps, it almost seemed as if the place where they had trouble coming to agreement were congressional. I mean, if you take a look at partisan lean, which they're not supposed to do, but it kind of gives you an idea of similarities. The congressional had the biggest difference in terms of partisan lean of districts.
Do you want to share a screen and give us any information on that?
Yeah, so let me pull up. This is what's really nice is I can actually use the wonderful resource that 538, what the political statistics website provides, which is all of the proposed congressional maps. And so just take a step back. The biggest difference here is, so this is what the map currently looks like. And I can toggle that when I go to letters and names. But if we take a look at the letters plans, you can see this exactly what Barbara was talking about, you know, the southern tier being split, the Albany district changing a little bit, and this little, I don't know what to call that. It's a little
Syracuse. Let's call it Syracuse.
Yeah, the Syracuse hook. But in terms of partisan difference, it represents loss of one district. So the change from the old map is one loss of a Republican seat. Instead of 7 Republican seats, it's 6. Same number of competitive districts, same number of Democratic leaning seats. But when we take a look at the names plan, which we assume is the Republican plan, the difference is 2 fewer Democratic leaning seats and 1 more Republican leaning seat, which is actually in New York City, what is the 10th district, and they would put compact Kathleen Rice from Nassau County and Gregory Meeks into one district in the 4th down right there. So while there's not a lot of difference, and this is actually something I addressed with them when they came to town, you don't have a lot of differences in Monroe County when it comes to congressional. I think the differences come downstate. I think it comes southern tier. And I don't think that they were able to make up their minds on that, because when we move on to the Senate and Assembly maps, a little more complicated in terms of more seats, but the partisan differences were negligible. It was plus or minus 1 or 2 seats out of 100 out of 63.
Wow, that's
but I think that Congress is really where they came to an impasse in terms of their negotiation. Was my feeling of it, not confirmed by them, but my feeling on it.
Interesting. Okay, so I think we'll move along to look at Senate districts then. So let me say a word about the website I'm using here, because some of our viewers might be interested. It's called newyork.redistrictingandyou.org. And it's got all of the maps. And in addition to what I've been showing you the 2 different maps, but you can also see the current maps. Okay, so you were talking about parts of Monroe County that are not currently in the 25th district. And you can put it half and half so you can see both at the same time. So that can be useful. It can also get confusing, so I tend to do all or nothing. So let's move on to the Senate. Oh, yes, that's up here. Okay, now the Senate districts
Are you sharing your screen?
Oh, thank you. Oh, gosh, I just demonstrated all that.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I'll spare everyone going through it again. The Senate districts look quite different from what we currently have. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit first. Oops. Okay, so notice what Rochester is pretty much its own Senate district on this map. The entirety of Rochester is a Senate district, a bit more than Rochester itself, and we'll see more about that when we zoom in, but I wanted to be able to show the suburbs for a moment. So we've got Rochester as one district, and then we've got the eastern suburbs as a separate district, eastern and southern, sort of a wraparound district. And then we've got Greece and Hilton, and the far western suburbs are in this gangly looking district that goes all over the map, right? It goes way east of the Rochester suburbs to Phelps. It goes all the way south to, I can't read what that is. So it's a huge district because it is mostly rural. So for the western suburbs, it's a huge change, right? They used to, up till now, they've been part of the city, and suddenly they're not only not with the city, but they're really with rural people that they probably don't know very well. All right, let's zoom in and see where they drew some of the lines. Okay, this lets us see that the city Senate district is a bit bigger than the city, so it includes all of Irondequoit and a little bit of Webster and Penfield, and I guess that's probably Brighton and probably down into Henrietta, but probably not all of Henrietta. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, so I do know some of the maps may have to be altered because I can't remember quite particularly, but I do believe that some of the, yeah, they definitely did in the letters, and they probably did in the names as well. I think they were counting on that the state Senate maps would allow for the splitting of towns, which isn't going to be happening this year. That was a part of Prop 1, which was defeated. So they will have to redraw the Senate map if they want to use anything that cuts through a town.
Oh,
Yeah.
so we're going to give
First was-
feedback on these maps, but they can't use either of these maps in their final.
Well, I'm not 100% sure if names cut the block on border anywhere. But they would have to alter it anyways, because you can't just stick with, there were fair criticisms of names that we'll be able to show, but I do know for sure that the letters draft plan cut into Penfield, Webster, Greece, Chili, and Gates, which isn't able to happen now.
That's a pretty big deal, isn't it?
Yeah, that is a
and all the things I read up on Prop 1 to be able to explain it, I never noticed that in any of the things I was reading that it talked about that one.
Yeah, it's a block on border, I believe it's referred to.
Okay.
Redistricting.
Do you want to say anything more about this one before I switch over to look at the names?
Yeah, I'll say that I think the general feeling from the comments that I've seen from people submitted to the IRC was that they wanted something. I know it's difficult from trying to draw it. They want something that's more compact than this for Monroe County. But I'll say that they did I'll kind of talk about names a little bit before we even get there, but they both did a good job of not splitting us into 6 separate districts like they did in the 2010 redistricting. It's a big change to only be in 3 very positive. So I think that's the best part about this commission, is that they really listened to people when they came to them.
Yeah, they did.
And these maps, this is a map that I think shows that even if they made mistakes, it's a map that actually shows that they have a genuine interest in helping communities.
And several people at the hearings did speak in favor of having a Senate district that was basically Rochester.
Yeah.
And they did it. So yeah, I was kind of impressed. So this is the other version. Again, Rochester is all within, well, not all within one district, because you've got Maplewood and Charlotte going with. So let me.
A little pointer finger, as I like to call it.
Yeah, I don't.
A little finger.
That there's basically no one living in that pointer finger. I don't know what it's a creek or something, right? So, so this one, Greece ends up with a more sensible district that probably feels, like neighbors and people they know, whereas Penfield and Webster end up in this district, which stretches all the way north of Syracuse. Almost up to
Webster and Parenton and Fairport.
Yeah.
Fairport area.
So I'm a Penfield resident, and I don't really like that idea. I don't feel like I have a community of interest with all those towns that I don't even know the names of out in those rural areas. So it seems that they had trouble figuring out what to do with the suburbs. So now's when you and I got creative. So
we did get creative.
I'm going to stop this share for a moment so that I can find my version.
And I'll say quickly that, like I was saying earlier, the partisan difference isn't that big. It comes down to about 42 leaning Democratic seats versus 41 between names and letters, 16 versus 17 competitive, and both of them have 5 leaning Republican seats. It's really comparable to what it was 10 years ago in terms of the partisan lean of these districts, or what it's become.
Okay, that's definitely interesting. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to sharing and show my creative map. So I didn't like the fact that one or the other side of Rochester ended up being far away from people they would think of as their relevant neighbors. So I tried making a sort of a donut district that surrounds Rochester. Now, you can see that I've left the borders of the towns showing in this view. So you can see that I've chopped up a fair amount of towns, which you're now telling me I can't do. So these wouldn't fly nearly as well.
I apologize for ruining your
really.
vision.
I hold you personally responsible.
I mean, it's funny. It's so weirdly artistic, this process.
It is, yeah. I after playing with these mapping softwares, I have a lot more humility and respect for the people who have to actually do it. They have a hard problem, and I will no longer assume the worst of them. So I mean, I feel a little bit funny about this map, in that the purple suburban district I drew, that's kind of a classically gerrymandered looking district, isn't it? Like, mostly when you get long, skinny things wrapping around other things, you get suspicious about what that's about.
I mean, something that I actually talked with them about and then submitted a map for after the meeting. And I think it's part of the difficulty. Once we got these draft plans, I think a lot of us, a lot of people, like the map nerds, assumed that they would kind of want to stick with a similar, like, would be minor changes from the original. But they were open to major changes if people thought it was necessary. I talked with them about changing it over because they use Irondequoit and Brighton. I talked about switching it to Rochester plus a West Side set of communities, and making Irondequoit and Brighton kind of wrap around with Webster and Penfield and Parrington, East Rochester.
So
Pittsford.
Why don't I stop this share and you can show us what that would look like? So,
yeah.
Okay, so was that different from dividing Rochester?
Yeah, it is different.
Okay.
Do you want me to? I can show the east-west split too while I'm sharing.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop my share. So one thing we've talked about since these maps came out is, it sounded good that Rochester would have its own district. We think that Rochester's important. They need someone focused on their problems, but we didn't really like what it did to the suburbs. So now we're talking about maybe actually we should divide Rochester after all.
Yeah, and it was, what was nice was, it was funny, I almost felt that at first I thought, I was like, is Chairman, because Chairman Martins asked about it, and I was like, is he like really critical of this? And I think he was really interested in the end with, is this, is it better for the people of Rochester to be split? And I said, because I commented on it as well, I don't know, I'm not a resident of the city, but this is kind of what a map would look like. It would still probably split off that Webster, and I think I actually cut Parrington, which we can't do now, or not Parrington. I think I cut Penfield in this map. Yeah, which we can't do now, but these are kind of fixable things. But it would split off some of our eastern communities But it would split the city of Rochester right down by the river. I mean, literally, it follows the river. It's the most fair way to split the city, in my mind. It's a geographic boundary, something that is encouraged as a demarcation. It keeps Monroe County more whole, I'd say, than the ones that they have now. It's 2 districts contained within the county, instead of the names, which splits out really far, and the letters, which one of them is fully in the county, but I think it's oddly drawn. I think I joke this is the most aesthetically pleasing version of that map. I also have to say, please ignore the fact that the 56th district in this case is blue. It has nothing to do with partisan lean. It's just the color that got assigned to it. I always think it's funny. I think to myself, but I have to remember I don't want partisan. The other option I talked to them about, something that looks like this. You still have to split out some of the communities, but I think, it may represent a more accurate or a closer, more compact Monroe County than what they currently have. They can play around with it. That's why I sent it to them.
So that's basically Rochester and Greece are one district.
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting is it creates almost a perfect, those two together create almost a perfect population proportion. I mean, it's almost like combining 2 cities with how large Greece is. Some people may like it, some people won't. I don't think that there's going to be a happy ending with redistricting necessarily. I think there's always going to be some people that are mad. I prefer this map, I'll say. I don't know how city residents feel. Still, I don't know. Some of them like the concept of the split down the middle. Some of them I've heard say keep it whole. But I think it's, there are benefits for both. Do you want 1 representative? Do you want 2? I think the river helps with that. It's a lot different than, I can pull up the current state Senate map.
So let me just mention at this point that people are welcome to put comments or questions in the Q&A, because we would love to hear from people.
It's a lot easier in this case than the map that we have now. This is it split into 6, where you have 3 different representatives of the city. So it's much easier to explain to people, you live on the west side of the river, you contact this person. You live on the east side, you contact this person. Then explaining that if you live in parts of the South Wedge or Highland Park or the 19th Ward, parts of Plymouth Exchange, that you would contact the person whose district goes all the way to Amherst, where some of my family lives, and we consider that far away. They only come in every once in a while. Or, if you are a U of R student and you want to contact your representative, that you have this little spoon-like cutout there. So I think the East-West is the simplest. If we're going to split it, that's the explanation. If they want to keep it whole, I mean, that's fully up to them. But it seems like the general consensus was keep it whole. But I think that they were willing to listen if there was a community that said, no, actually split it.
So you've been looking at the comments on the website as they come in. Have you seen anybody saying keep it whole or split it?
No, people are more worried about congressional. People are more worried about local officials seem to be more worried about assembly. For Monroe County. I've seen more comments on assembly than I have on Senate, and nobody's really been saying like this. Nobody's really been pushing on the city, but I've been talking with some people about getting their opinions to the commission on this all, so they can have a better sense.
So one other thing that we could mention, they're not supposed to take this kind of thing into account, right? Yeah. Which is where do the incumbents live?
Yes.
Right? What happens?
A comment that I made during my first testimony, I said, I think if you notice, and I've been listening to these, I don't think a single person has said, I really, really care about where my incumbent lives.
Right, and they're not supposed to care, and in theory, I don't care either, but I admit I was shocked when they came out and, when they made the city hall, and so we've got Jeremy Cooney and Samra Brook both live in the city, and so both of them are going to be in that city district. And
I mean, even if you split it east and west, I believe they would still be cut into the same district. Based on where they live. Now, the only thing the thing I'll say about that is that there is a 1 cycle moratorium where if you live in Monroe County, you can run in the districts that are in Monroe County. The residency requirement gets changed up a little bit, and you'll see that with Congress and other states more likely. When 2 people get put into the same district, sometimes one of them will jump to another one where 50% of their former constituents would be, so that they can, I hate to say so that they don't have, so that they don't have to engage in a primary, basically.
yeah,
So that is always a possibility. But I don't know what the next set of maps will look like. So it'll be interesting to see for sure.
yeah, well, I mean, I'm not saying what the answer is, but both of them, I think, do have the city strongly in their minds, and to force one of them to move into the suburbs and have a district that has no city really feels like an odd thing to do.
It would be a big change. I like to think of redistricting if you're going to do, unless you have a map like North Carolina had, where they had to were legally required to change their districts because they broke the law. Sometimes it's best if you do it over 2 cycles where you undo past things, and not necessarily like shoving everything at once. I think that can be difficult, but I think that it's a hard balance for them.
Yeah. So we've got some comments coming in. It would be nice to have a rep from both parties. For some of us, like we do now in the state, many will lose that in some of the design. I think that might be more true in the assembly.
It's true in the Senate to some degree, because I believe Jeremy represents all the way out to Hamlin. So yeah, for the state that might change. Hamlin is definitely weird because it's cut out for they don't cut it out for the Senate. They do cut it out for Congress. So it's definitely an kind of almost the odd duckling of Monroe County. Both actually, and the next question about Webster, if there have been any comments about Webster always being attached to areas east, there actually have been a few comments, but I've seen more for assembly than I have for Senate. There may have been one, and some people
Webster with the east, right?
Some people really want Webster, and some people want Webster and Penfield out to the east. I don't know. I have some friends in Webster. I've never gotten the feeling where they're like, I'm very closely relating to the counties to the east of us. I think they certainly aren't thinking, I relate to Syracuse.
No, I don't think.
Or even Auburn.
Maybe SCOTUS, maybe.
Yeah. So I think it's the difficult part, and something that the IRC talked about was when you have these rural districts that have 3,000 people in them, you have to hit a minimum number of people in each district, and sometimes that means it's going to be expansive. And that's where frustration comes in for some people. We all like compactness, but sometimes it's just not possible in terms of geography.
If they can't cut the towns, then they almost have to cut the city to get equal sizes.
That's true, and that has historically been what's done, is that they cut the city. So I know in the names map they didn't cut the city, and they didn't cut the towns of Monroe County, at least. They may go that route. I don't know.
Say that again. Let me pull that one back
I
up.
believe, I am 99% sure when I was looking at it, that the letters or the names version of the map does not cut any towns in Monroe County. I don't know about elsewhere in the state because I haven't had a chance to analyze that post Prop 1 defeat.
I see. Yeah, so they've got all of Webster, Penfield, and Parenton going with the east.
Yeah, which I think that there were, and I think I sent them a version of this map that managed to do things a little bit more compactly than like spreading it out that far, and more made it like a north-south type thing, instead of going as far east and west as they did, which I thought was, and multiple people I think thought was a little ridiculous to have almost to Syracuse.
And I have to say, I was interested in some of the people from further afield who came to the hearings, how much they didn't want to be put with us. They don't.
That's true. I saw someone from Victor saying, I have nothing in common with Monroe County. And I thought to myself, I think you have a little bit more in common than you might want to admit. But there are definitely going to be unhappy people, no matter what.
There were people down in the southern tier harking back to the headphones district when Pittsford was going all the way down to the southern tier. And they said, we don't want to be with those people. And I had lived in Pittsford at that time and I didn't want to be with them either.
Well, and that was a common complaint. The southern tier was like, we would like to be with the southern tier. We are not Buffalo. We are not north of Buffalo. We are the southern tier. Very common that from every like pre-post comments submitted to the commission. They're like, we are the southern tier. So it's like strong identity there. Very unlikely that we see another Pittsford to the southern tier district.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna move us along to the assembly unless you had anything else.
No, I have nothing else to say about that one.
Okay, so let me share screen again. Okay, so let's start here. So I guess I can zoom in a little bit more. So there's quite a bit of change in some of the districts we're seeing here, not all of them. So what I think of as Harry Bronson's district doesn't really exist in the same form, does it?
No.
We've got that central one that I've put the dot on, which is, that's primarily DeMond's district at this point in time, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But it doesn't go way out to Gates the way his.
It's not a request that I actually remember making. I don't remember if anyone else did. I feel like I like to think that I had a decent amount of input in these maps because some of the things that I mentioned actually showed up. I can point them.
Well, you spoke so well and with so much information behind it, it would seem compelling. Okay, so there's no big gerrymandered monstrosity like Bronson's district. DeMond's district shifts to be more totally city.
Totally city.
And then we've got this district, which I guess is Sarah Clark's current district, but she loses.
She actually loses her home.
Oh, is that right?
She would be gerrymandered into, I'm not going to say where people live, but I can say like from this map, I believe that this one of the two puts her in her old district and one of them puts her in the Grease Hilton, Maplewood, Lyle Otis district.
Okay, all right. So basically Brighton and Irondequoit and the southeastern part of the city are a district here. And then Greece is got a chunk of the city.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way out and includes Hilton, but not as far as Brockport.
Yeah.
Brockport and Churchville become a district. If we look at the east side, this district is pretty similar to Jen Lunsford's current district.
Yeah, actually, the only big differences are whether or not it includes East Rochester.
And I know they have split East Rochester here.
They did in this map. They didn't in the, I think they just didn't include East Rochester in the other.
All right. So Pittsford, I never thought that much about, but Candace Rubin showed up at the hearings and spoke about how Pittsford keeps getting districted with well south, so the rural areas, and so I see that's happening again here.
Yeah.
And then we've got the southwestern suburbs. So what would that include? Is that like half of Henrietta and maybe
That
Roche?
is part of Brighton. I have to check. I need to zoom in more for myself. Actually, I'm pulling up one of them right now. Pulling up both of them. But yeah, that is, I believe that cut. Now here's the thing that I'm not sure about. I'm half sure about it. I believe that you can cut towns in assembly redistricting. Could be totally wrong.
You can cut them for assembly, but not for Senate?
I believe, so the way that I understand it, and you're not necessarily supposed to, I think that they just frown upon it.
Well, clearly you can, because East Rochester's cut. Right?
Yeah, they did for East Rochester, and the block on border and the town on border were specifically for the Senate. So that didn't, so they didn't even, there was no changes with the assembly in that way.
So I didn't realize it was different rules for the Senate. And
it is. It's. I will say that we have a very convoluted system that they.
Yeah.
I expect to see another proposition on the ballot that may be a little bit clearer than what Prop 1 was.
Right. So this little bit of Rochester that's out here, is that basically the airport?
Yes. Yeah. That always gives me a laugh.
Okay, so it's not really probably any people that live there.
Yeah, that is a no. No, okay. Actually, no, here's actually an interesting thing. There are people who live in that little cutout of Gates. And I actually spoke with David about that and told him that if he took some of the, and this is totally in the weeds for our attendees, I apologize, but I told him if he took the districts to the south, the districts, that he could avoid taking people because they are industrial.
Gotcha. Okay, so here's the other version for the assembly. So once again, in the main city, we've got a large, not gerrymandered looking piece of the city that's central.
Yeah.
And then we've got the eastern and southern suburbs. And again, this district out here that Jen Lunsford currently represents looks similar. So I see
would contain East Rochester.
It's got all of East Rochester instead of part of East Rochester. But Pittsford is still going to the southern tier.
Yep.
And so Brockport's going way to the west. So Hilton goes with Greece, and we still got the chunk of the city on the west of the river and above 490.
So what's really interesting about that is this map is a little bit messier in terms of the way that they cut things. It has like a little dig out of Spencerport and also digs into Irondequoit just a tiny bit for the Grease Hilton majority district. And the district that we would call DeMond's district currently also goes into Irondequoit, like just one precinct. So it was very weird.
That is weird.
And I'll pull it up on my map and get like a really like zoomed in version of it to show.
So I just thought I saw a village that got split. What was I looking at? Oh, Spencerport gets split. That seems avoidable to me. I don't.
And it is. Yeah, the 100% is. And I'll show in my assembly maps that I had drawn.
Okay, so I'm going to stop my share and let you.
All right. So let me first do that zoom in on the. So this is exactly what we're talking about here. So you see this Grease Hilton district cuts into Spencerport. It cuts into Irondequoit a little bit. The Spencerport Gates cuts into the city. DeMond's Rochester centric district cuts into it's very weird. And it's just like little precincts, or in this case, like a little chunk. They cut out. This goes into Chili. It's almost a stark contrast to that very clean district that they have labeled EF, the Webster Penfield Fairport district. Now, okay,
so I guess, if you're trying to be really precise about numbers, you end up doing stuff like that, right?
Yeah, you do. You really do. So let me pull up the slightly altered assembly map as I presented it to the commission when I sent it to them. So a slight alteration. So basically what I said to them is you can cut it a little bit cleaner. Both times they cut the Maplewood district or the Maplewood historic area in half. I said you can kind of clean up that line. You can clean up the lines in DeMond's district. You can clean up this, which is currently would be Sarah's. And I actually said if they really wanted to, and this is almost a big swing for slightly altered, they could take this EI district and make it Gates, Chili, Henrietta, and Pittsford. A lot more compact here. Sadly, some of the further out areas get pushed as they have been in the past, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it's kind of hard to, if you were to just take this here, this part of Monroe County, that's not a full district. Now, the really big swing that I took with them, personal favorite of mine, I've gotten good feedback on. Please ignore everything that's very unfocused in this map because I did a full statewide district. Is actually a split in Grease down Long Pond. Because I made an argument, and I actually had seen some people who, I don't know if they'd be fully supportive of it, but there were some people who said Grease are, in Spencerport, who said Grease are our neighbors. It was an argument made by the current supervisor of Spencerport, or of Ogden. And I think that it's part of that classic, Grease is a really weird 90,000 person town that has a very historic area that bleeds right into the city. I mean, that's where I grew up as a kid. And I think it was hard to tell where Britain Road became the city for me. And, Barnard for people in Greece, a lot of times it's Greece in their minds, but it's actually the city. It gets weird. And so I actually created, this is the most compact that I was able to get Monroe County. It only shoots out a little bit. You see Brighton and Henrietta, Chili only shoot out into one of the more southern counties a little bit. Hamlin does not. Hamlin, Brockport, Clarkson doesn't go all the way into its more western county. And this cuts through 2 counties, but it is actually a shape that we could describe geometrically.
Yeah,
It's nice. And I actually saw some people in Farmington say we'd rather be put closer with Monroe County than we would with those Syracuse towns. And so, you know, this is a very compact version. I don't know if they'll consider it. And it also does a similar thing as I did with the state Senate. It splits along the river, except for this little bit of the Plymouth Exchange neighborhood. So I at least was able to keep it neighborhood specific. But yeah, it's a much more compact map than what they necessarily have now.
So I was kind of fascinated looking at you putting Irondequoit with Penfield and Webster.
That was you and I had talked about that over email. Yeah, it actually is really interesting how when you're fitting pieces, how some of these districts or some of these populations fit together perfectly, where you don't even have to cut a little bit extra out. And I'll say something really interesting to me in terms of partisanship is that the Republican maps actually gave more leaning seats to the Democrats than the Democrats map did.
Really?
That shocked me. I was really surprised. It threw off my entire belief of like names and letters were clear cut for one party. Yeah, it was 97 seats. And the names map are Democrats, 38 are competitive and 15 are Republican. And the letters maps, 95 lean Democrat, 41 are competitive and 14 are Republican. Which is a little bit different from our current numbers, which are 98 Democrat, 34 competitive, and 18 Republican. Both of them take away Republican seats and make them competitive, and both of them take away at least 1 or 3 Democratic seats and make them competitive. Very, very interesting how they chose to do this. And I think some of that actually comes with the fact that they're not considering partisanship, that they're considering communities of interest more. I mean, it was a complaint with the old commission LAT4 that they oftentimes would slice and dice a district, ignoring the population within it.
Yes. So we can talk about, we can say that the IRC really wants to hear from people. So like if anyone listening to this has an opinion, they really should.
It was like, send me the full state map. And I was like, David, it's not good. It was an exercise in drawing more than it was an actual knowledge of the state. I know a little bit about New York City, but I can't comment about North County.
Yeah. So, whatever level of information people have, they welcome. So, if you live in Pittsford and you're tired of being districted with the Southern Tier, you can just say that. And they can work with that. If you
people have written like 2 sentences, I've seen comments. And some of them have been nonsensical. Some of them have been like, this is a clear Democratic gerrymander. And actually it's not. Trust me, these I have to say, and I've said this to everyone, for some people who think the commission is really divided along partisan lines, that they're the most responsive people that I've government servants that I've ever spoken to on
That's
both
my
sides.
impression too. Yeah.
Almost hard to tell. It was all like, if I had to guess partisanship when I spoke with them in person, it would have been hard to guess if it wasn't for them saying like, oh, when I was working for the minority leader, it was almost difficult, which I think is hard in politics to pull off.
So really people should be, just email in a paragraph or a page, or you don't have to get on to district mapping software and draw it all up and make it all balanced. You can just give them the bottom line of what you wish they could do.
I posted
on the other hand, if anyone wants to get onto district software, it's easier than it's ever been before. And you and I are available to anyone who's interested. I think we could have one-on-one Zooms if people want to do that or anything. So let's talk then about what's going to happen next. So you're telling me that on the Assembly and the Senate, you think they might well be able to come to a consensus?
I strongly believe that they'll come to a consensus on those two. I think that they'll come to a consensus on Congress. I don't think that they are as set in their ways with those, even necessarily in those, their bigger districts and more implications for federal politics. I think that they come to a compromise. But I think that it's faster to do the Assembly and the Senate than it will be for Congress.
So by the way, we have a good question there. If somebody likes one of your maps, how could they refer to it when submitting their comments?
I can, yeah, I mean, you can refer to it as, I'm trying to think. You can say, like, I prefer a map that includes these communities. You could write it out.
If you wanted to give me links, we could put them on our webpage.
Yeah, we can do that. Absolutely. We can post the links. I posted in the chat the link for the Independent Redistricting Commission website. If anyone wants to access that, they're actually they're on there. My maps are, you could pull them. It's a little difficult because they're in a weird format. But you can.
If they scroll around looking for your name, they would find you.
Yeah, you can. It doesn't say Dylan Daler, but there's only one Dylan who is submitting maps.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I mean, you can absolutely, if you like one of them.
So if they're able to come to a consensus, then the process is that the Assembly and the Senate have to have an up or down vote on the proposed maps.
Yes, which I feel is actually the more difficult part of this. I think that it'll be easier to get the chair and the co-chairs teams together than it will to get the Independent Redistricting Commission and our electeds in agreement. That's my, and even with there was the change that was supposed to happen with Prop 1, which was very confusing. It would have made it easier for the minority party to be ignored, which some people liked, some people didn't. The League said, no, we don't prefer this amendment. Had a lot of respect for that because that was hard to, there were a lot of groups that supported it.
It confused Republicans I talked to that they agreed with me on.
That is true. I think that was a first for some of them with me as well. But I think yeah, the timeline looks something like they'll release their next set of maps on or before January 15th. There'll be an up and down vote where I believe 2/3 of both houses.
I think it's only half if it comes recommended by the.
Oh, you're right. If it's recommended by the 7/10 of the commission, it's a half of the Senate and half of the Assembly. If it doesn't, it takes 2/3.
Right. And plus, of course, if they submit more than one set of maps, then you start getting into the whole thing about, one could take up one set first and the other could take up the other set first, and then they'd have to have.
So I'll say that I think the best course of action is submit comments to the Independent Redistricting Commission, wait to see what their maps are. If they're a big problem when they come through, contact your elected representative and say, you got to send them back to the drawing board one more time. If you love the maps, you should go to your elected representative and say, don't you dare vote against this map. It's good. Even if it inconveniences you, it's good. And this is something that, I might hold against you. Even if you love them, it's tough love, tough love with your elected representatives.
Right. So is it possible that they might agree on the Assembly and the Senate, but then have two sets of maps for Congress?
I didn't pass my mind that they were going to release 2 different sets of maps. So it's possible, anything is possible. They could not come to an agreement at all and just have to send all of their information to the legislature. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that that's what they're interested in.
So you think they will?
No, I think that they want this to go really, really well. I mean, it's like your first
I
try. You
know.
wanna set
Yeah,
the-
I just wanted to shake them and say, it's your job to negotiate with each other.
I think
That's
they
what you
know
were appointed to do.
it was such a short period of time.
Yeah, it was.
But I
really-
recognized, and I think they know too, even
yeah.
if they don't say it, because I don't think they want to make excuses, but they.
And the thing I discovered when I was playing with the maps is how many things I don't know anything about. So I was blithely drawing maps in parts of the state where really I don't know anything. So knowing how I feel and people feel about the lines right around me where I know places, I assume that there's people who care about those. And, so they just didn't have all that deep an input from every part of the state. So there's probably all kinds of small changes they can make that are feasible. And once they know it matters, they can do it.
Yeah.
And I assume that there's room to negotiate in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let me scroll. Yep, I think we've handled the
Covered
question.
everything.
So thank you for joining me tonight, Dylan.
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking redistricting, even if
I
I
learned
try to
something
make it so it's
every-
not a eyes glaze over process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the colors on the maps are so pretty.
So
I just
pretty. I
love
love them because
Yeah.
they really brighten up my day.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna say goodnight to you and to everyone, and thank you for joining us. So we will put links on your maps and my maps on the website. So if people want to, well, no, you said yours are already submitted. I haven't submitted mine. How
Yeah,
many sets are you submitting, by the way?
a lot. They asked for a lot.
Okay, so you don't feel like you have to choose the best among your maps.
I will not choose between my children. No.
How interesting is that? So make them decide between your children. Yeah, right.
So yeah, people will have access to those at some point in the near future.
Yeah. Okay. So, if you have comments or questions, you can always reach us through the league website, and we will get back to people. And so thank you, Dylan, again, and I'll say goodnight.